सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय, महायोगी स्वामी उमानंद सरस्वती की जय. Friends, the earlier video on Rigved, was very sweetly appreciated. Almost I received 950 views in 2 days. And that shows that, yes, people are curious about Ved. People are curious about Ved. So, I myself, I'm almost falling in love with Ved. So, and especially the Agni character, the Agni Dev. So, I'm tempted to continue. First, I thought I will at least keep 15 days of gap between one and second lecture. But since I'm absolutely floored by Ved, I want to continue. So, today we go to the gist of a second lecture, the gist of Ved, on gist of Ved. And I'm going to take you from 400 to 800 couplets, RICHAS today. So let us see what they have to tell us. Now, sage Angira. Now we are talking about certain sages along with it. These are the names which are given. They are the contributors of the hymns. So we are going to talk about them. Sage Angira discovered the needs of medicine, the needs of medicines for mortal, for three dhatus. The three dhatus were kapha, pitta, that is acidity, and vata, that is gas. So, Angira Rishi, a sage, discovered the need for medicines, and it so happened that he turned to the Ashwini Kumars, the gods, the physicians of the gods. So, now we'll see how these, it's a beautiful development of human beings. It's a journey. It's a journey which we are going to read about. Probably this number 3 of dhatus made that number 3 very special because Ashwini Kumars were asked and requested to bring the medicines down 3 times in a day, thrice a day. Probably there were certain medicines were appropriate to be taken in the morning and some in the afternoon and some in the evening. So a mention of these, and there was along with it the Ashwini Kumars was supposed to have a chariot with 3 wheels. Now, whatever that significance of 3 is there, I thought I'll mention it because some of the questions you people are going to try and solve it. I'm just going to tell you what I have really loved about Veda. There were 33 gods were asked to come down and prayers were offered to them. Now, sage Angira gives us reason why he turned to some of the gods. So he tells, Angira says, for benevolence, Kalyankari, that is for benevolence, I turned to Agni. For protection, to Varun. For rest, that is rest, a tired body needs rest. He said, I turned to Nisha, the night. And for energy, he said, I turned to sun. Now these gods became the subject of observation. They became the subject of observation and studies. Now 3 regions like space and earth were near the sun and they were studied. But there was another region which was of death. It was not known. However, they had found a name for the god of death and that was Yama. Sun was studied for his movements, its effects, and were observed. Angira described it like rising of the sun, descending of it, roaming, giving speed, light, and breath. His absence at night made Angira wonder where the sun would disappear. Then the types of rays also were studied by Angira Rishi. These which destroyed the infections were also looked into. To attain godliness, now Agni realized the need of godliness and for which what was needed? the sages realized they needed Amrit. Amrit is elixir. And this Kanva Muni praised Agni because Agni procured it from some 3 names they have given: Turvit, Navatsava, and Brahadrat. Well, we'll come to the details of it later as we proceed, but right now we can only say that the medicine, the Amrit the concept was there, the medicine concept came up, and gradually man was moving towards a world of awareness. The next one is beautiful, you have to listen to this. Marudgan, god of winds, also now were prayed to for their contribution. Now, along with the Agni that we talked about, and these 4 elements we talked about, along with it, Marudgan were also prayed to, and they were given the credit of shaking clouds and branches. Not only that, and terrifying man. they terrified man, but however, and he would run helter-skelter. Man realized Marudgan were angry, now brought in lightning. Now you see how gradually man has started discovering. I am not giving you the details are very beautiful, but they are available in my book. We will soon be putting it out in Kindle, Amazon, so I'm sure you will get there. But meanwhile, let us do what little we can. Marudgan, the god of winds, was also observed then. He came under observation of the sages. They moved like organized army. Marudgan were said that they moved like organized army. And when they were strong, they spread far and wide. They spread far and wide. They drove away the rainless clouds, and mortal prayed to them. Man prayed to them. What was the prayer? What was the prayer? The prayer was, don't leave earth. Though you can reach up to the heavens, please do stay upon earth. Now why was it? Because it said when the winds were strong and moved, the cows mooed. Yes, they had their own expression of mooing. Moo, they did. And the rivers also, it added to the beauty of the river banks. So man started appreciating the elements, and he started observing them, appreciating them. And Kanva Muni wanted even to study these moves of the winds. And they thought that man could collectively make progress if they studied these various elements as gods. And then Kanva Muni invited Brahmanspati. We had already done this. He invited Brahmanspati. Not only that, they started holding sessions of scholars. They started holding sessions of scholars where these subjects were discussed. They were discussed, and gradually they realized that hymns were needed. Hymns were needed to praise the gods and get guided. The Brahmanspati guided the Kshatriyas. They made them brave, and the Kshatriyas in return protected the common man. So there was a beautiful sort of a relationship being built amongst men on earth and gods and the animate, inanimate, let's say, and there was something very beautiful. The blending was coming through. Now, if we go to 500 to 550, gods such as Pushan, Rudra, Som, Usha, they were getting included. What was their role? Pushan was supposed to be a soul savior. He saved the souls and took them to another world after the death of man. Rudra, he was considered to be a scientific and a wise god. Scientific and wise god. And he was the remover of illnesses. Then at that time, can you imagine? The water therapy also has emerged, probably. The purity of water, because of the Vishwambhu Agni in that, was discovered, and people used it as a therapy to cure. illnesses. Then Som, the moon, now entered into to enrich the medicinal herbs, enrich the medicinal herbs. This time, the time of obtaining knowledge, now this is another beautiful concept here. The time of obtaining knowledge was decided to be morning time, that is dawn time, when Usha rose. So it was an inspiring time where people were able to get guided. Even gods woke up at this time if they wanted to procure knowledge. When I read this, I said I normally get up at 3:30 to study, 3:30. But when I read this now, I was so sure, no, if I have to understand Veda, I'm going to try and hold on this time and ask God to explain the secrets of Veda, or the beauty of Veda to me as I study. Because, because man who wanted knowledge of spirit and matter. Now here the man turned to the understanding of spirit and matter. Now this is something very beautiful. And gods were, now we have grouped the gods. They were Sun, Savitra, Usha, Ashwini Kumars, Bhaga and Agni. And the sages who were discovering the knowledge and studying them, studying these gods, they were Priyamed, Atri, Viru, Angira, Kanva and so on. Now mortal realized that even food made the difference. There were foods which helped the brain to be inspiring, and they now man, this time mortal, also by now had learnt how to cross the rivers with the help of the woods. So here we are growing with them, we are moving on with them. There's plenty in between to tell, but we cannot keep on going into the details. I am going to leave that to you to try and read, and the books will be soon available. Meanwhile, I'm just going to give you just the gist of this. Now, yajna, it was now started being practiced, and it was practiced with an intention that sorrows of life were to be overcome. The yajnas were introduced to overcome sorrows of life. Ashwini Kumars and Usha, they are supposed to have brought treasures to mankind. Usha made scholars more wise. Usha is dawn, the early morning. As I told you, we get up at that time to study. So Usha made scholars more wise. She made man move, birds fly, and minds of wild animals maintained silence when she rose. You see the dogs bark whole night, but in the early morning you will see the silence is there. So that shows the effect of Usha, that is the morning dawn. Followed, she opened the gates of heavens, and she was supposed to be the fair looking lady, as the daughter of heaven. Sunlight, they looked upon sunlight as an example of probably having God's light to be of this power. Man started imagination of God's light to be like the light of the sun, something man's brains were working towards. Now we had, there's plenty more to talk about, but we're going to go gradually. So here we have, when one reads about descriptions about the greatness, now we have Indra. The greatness of Indra was mentioned by sage Angira. Sage Angira talked about Indra, and Angira later was God Agni, but earlier in his birth he was Angira Rishi. He talked about the greatness of Indra. Of course, there are hundreds of RICHAS for it, but I'm going to shorten it because that's what the aim is, that we give you the gist of the RICHAS. Indra had killed almost hundreds of Asurs. Asurs were men with bad intentions. They were mortals then, or they were probably a little stronger than mortals, or aborigines, and who had bad intentions, who were not in support of mankind. So these were killed. They were amongst them. The names were Vrutra, Val, Ahi, Pipru, Arbad, Namuch, Karanch, Parpeya, Rajishthwa, Bangrud. 20 kings along with 70,000 army of his were killed by Indra. Then Shushnasur and Shambhasur. So these were some of the Asurs who were powerful men, powerful people. They were killed by Indra. But simultaneously, he also saved the sages, the holy people. They were Atri, Angira, Vimadrishi, Vishana, Vruchaya, and Kakshiman. So these were some of the names, and his deeds were held together. The good deeds were, he had almost performed 100 yajnas, he had stores of knowledge, and he had set up almost like universities. He had also made the rivers flow in the interest of mankind. He protected the good and destroyed the evil. Man should worship him, was the conclusion which was given by sage Angira. Now, sage Angira was described as Angira praised Indra, Gautam praised Agni. It's a beautiful development. Sage Gautam was in praise of Agni. He called Agni the nuclei of all lives. See whether the Rishi-Munis were familiar with all these understandings. And he was called the king of mortals, a head of heavens, center of earth, knower of Ved, and beneficial to mankind. Bhrigu Rishi is said to have installed him on the earth. Both Indra and Agni were praised by Gautam and Angira. Now we come to the... just give me a minute. Yes. Now we come to 700 to 750. Indra's greatness surpassed heavens and earth. He had now built ghats, dams on rivers and directed their flow. He became the organizer of the world. He also built a home for a sage, Turvit, whose house was washed away by rivers. So there was a spark in him of goodness. Sage Nodha, another name comes in, who sang the praise of Indra. And hymns were then so powerful. Hymns which were made by the sages were so powerful that they gave birth to chivalry around. It created a chivalrous atmosphere, and enemy was driven away. 4 rivers came under Indra's region. They were Sindhu, Ganga, Yamuna, and Saraswati. We are so close to it. We feel so close to this. This is a long time back, but we are feeling close to it. Sage Asyasya wrote hymns in praise of Indra. Then Gautam also mentioned Usha and Nisha. They were considered as the maidens. There was poetry read in the universe. The universe was not like black and white. It was not just black and white. It was as if the poet was writing, and it was true. Vishwamitra is called Gathin, a storyteller. Later he's contributed to chapter 3. And then later we have Atri Muni, who has contributed to the literature. It's beautiful. Let's just go by it. I'm gradually, I hope I'm able to complete this work undertaken by me. Indra's treasures never came to an end. A strange thing they realized, the Rishi-Munis realized, the sages realized, that whatever the color of the cow was, the milk was white. Whether it was a black cow or the red cow or the beige color, or you call it a brown, you call white, whatever, the milk was white. And of course, Gautam described Marudgan too. He called them the descendant, he described them as the Marudgan had descended from heavens, and they were just hovering up. Marudgan is winds, god of winds. They hovered over 14 celestial regions. They could uproot every life on earth if they decided to. And when they came with a force, there was a lightning there. Now this brought rains and crops, so Marutgan were requested to stay back on earth, and they were prayed to stay back on earth. Anyway, now we saw man saw, I would love to use this word, man saw romance in the nature, because they called this lightning as a beautiful maiden coming in when the Marut were angrily moving around. It's a very beautiful feeling you get here. They roared loudly and were like brave soldiers. Now, to find the supreme God, the ultimate truth. Now, this is very interesting. This is very interesting. The gods also, the gods of elements, the gods of planets, all realized that they had to make earth a beautiful place. They had to do their duties well towards this, in order to discover the supreme. Now the gods trying to discover the supreme is a stage we all need to see it here. Then you have, I have not summarized the last 50, but I would like to read the whole because it's beautiful. So it's a first summary, not a second summary of it, but it is a. Now the luxury was comforting on earth. Earth now started becoming a place of luxury. Today we understand what is luxury. We need good apartments, we need swimming pools, we need gyms, we need guarded society, we need televisions, we need ACs. Well, this is all comfort zones. Similarly, at that time, let's see what was the luxury on earth. It was a spread wide. There was space there. Earth had space. It was wide. Then mountains and clouds provided crops. Rivers were refreshing. Horses were fast. Agni contributed to light, heat and speed and observed duteous life. These elements were competing with each other, and Agni was complementary. They were complementing each other, and Agni was trying to establish friendliness with all these elements. One of them was rivers. So this was something he was, now Agni, about Agni, it is beautifully said, he was beneficial like a son. He was a supporter like a horse. He was nourishing like milk. He gave warmth, light and heat. Okay, again the light has gone, so I'm going to try and, okay, let's see. Oh my God. Suddenly the light sometimes just vanishes. Then he was like, I'll repeat, he was beneficial like a son, supporter like a horse, nourishing like milk, and gave warmth, light and heat. Agni offered his entire life for welfare of mankind. Sage Parashar describes Agni in a most noble manner. We need to understand this beauty. We need to understand the beauty. It is the poetry of universe. Ved is the poetry of universe. So forever he was engaged in auspicious rituals. Agni was forever engaged in auspicious rituals. He was functionally active. He gave joy like a wife would give to her husband. He was as white, as fair as sun, like a powerful battalion. He was dreadful like a swift army, and swift as lightning, and dreadful and shining. Mortal rushed to him day and night. Parashar further says, compares Agni to a king. No wonder all these qualities, what we talk about, that the man has the fiery side of fire. He has a fiery side to him, which makes him appear strong and courageous. And these are the things we use in life. Parashar further compared Agni to the king. As a king would honor the progressive scholars, Agni also accepted the prayers of the noble. Agni lived not only in caves but also in gods. He lived in gods, and this made gods stronger and mightier. The fiery quality of Agni was seen in men and gods. Men of intellect also possessed this quality. Agni, due to its truthfulness, had stabled his position as God in the on earth, in heaven and space, and everywhere. It was the truthfulness in him which gave him this honor. He protected homes of animal world too. Agni led the worshippers to wealth. He dwelled in medicinal herbs too, in trees that bear the flowers and the fruits. Agni lit up every night. Merely rubbing of the twigs gave Agni birth to Agni. He was really a birthless and deathless element. And man, for procreating powers also, the fiery element of Agni was required. Parashar compared Agni to the sun. Both were white, radiating entire world. He calls them egoless and duty-oriented, beneficial for mankind. Agni brings warmth and joy to mankind, possesses virtues of friendliness. Agni knew gods and mortals. He lived in deep. Now this is where we again have to know something. He lived in sea as Vadvanal. He was called Vadvanal in sea. The Agni in sea was called Vadvanal. The Agni in forests was Devagni. The Agni in stone was flint. The Agni in mortal was a spark. The Agni in beings was Vaishvanar. He volunteered to support all creatures, those who worshipped Agni with Ved mantra. He discovered, Agni bestowed treasures on him. Friends, I don't know, I want to understand if probably all religions even choose these elements as God to start with, even if you take Agni or sun, and probably we all, even humans, will get united. We won't have much differences, but whatever, as long as we realize the qualities of these 5 elements, because they were in the gods and in the mortal, they were the spark in gods and the mortal. They worked as sparks. The 5 elements, the qualities and the attributes of these 5 elements worked as sparks in gods and mortals. So even if you realize what is the base of these gods, I think man will be united. Mankind will be united. Earth is a beautiful place. Worship it. We are trying to see alternatives for the world on Mars and all. Why not love Earth itself and really love it so that we serve her? She's given us remarkable comforts. Thank you. This is Swami Radhikananda. Be with me on my journey to Ved, into Ved. Thank you.